Multi-effects units get written off before players even plug one in. The assumption is that they're either cheap toys or $3,000 workstations for touring pros, nothing worth owning in between. That assumption keeps plenty of guitarists locked onto a pedalboard of individual stomp boxes, convinced that going digital means trading tone for convenience. We've spent time with the units on both sides of that line, from budget processors to flagship units like the Quad Cortex and Line 6 Helix. Some expensive-looking boxes are outright liabilities. Some shockingly affordable processors do things a wall of pedals can't. Here are the 5 worth skipping and the 5 actually worth your money. If you love content that cuts through gear marketing to tell you what's actually worth plugging in, hit the subscribe button because it helps these videos reach players who are tired of guessing at their next pedal purchase. Starting with the units to leave on the shelf. Number 5. The Korg AX3G. This was Korg's entry into the crowded budget all-in-one processor market, packed into an injection-molded plastic shell that telegraphs its price point the second it's out of the box. It launched as part of Korg's ToneWorks lineup and was designed to be an easy add-on for a first guitar package, which is exactly how big box retailers bundled it into countless beginner setups for years. On a spec sheet, it looks generous, with a wide spread of amp voicings and effect combinations crammed into a compact footprint. In practice, that generosity falls apart the moment fingers actually hit the controls, and the plastic housing itself flexes noticeably under any real playing pressure. Owners describe a unit offering a huge range of tonal options, where somehow none of them land as genuinely usable. Parameters that should be a single knob turn away are instead buried behind combinations of small, unlabeled buttons, so dialing in something usable for a gig takes far more patience than a unit at this price has any right to demand. There's no built-in tuner and no USB connectivity either, 2 conveniences even budget units released years later treat as standard equipment. It's a spec sheet promising more than the hardware can deliver, and a whole generation of beginners bought one as a first processor, only to shelve it within weeks. Number 4. The Vox StompLab 2G. This one is sneaky because the hardware doesn't feel cheap. Vox gave it a metal chassis with smooth, weighted pot movement, and the first impression out of the box is of a genuinely serious little tool. That impression doesn't survive contact with the amp and cab models, which reviewers have described as sounding thin and reacting sluggishly to knob changes, undermining the confidence the build quality earns in the first 30 seconds. The overdrive, distortion, and fuzz voicings can turn shrill without much warning, which stings given that the StompLab shares its sound engine with Vox's far better regarded ToneLab and VT Plus amplifiers. To be fair, the wah and octave effects hold up reasonably well, and the built-in tuner is genuinely handy, which is exactly the kind of inconsistency that makes this pedal so frustrating to own, rather than simply bad across the board. Output routing is limited to a single 1/4-inch jack that has to double for mono output and stereo headphone monitoring, forcing awkward workarounds. It ships with over 60 combined amp, cab, and effect models, numbers that look impressive right up until a player starts A/Bing them against the amps they're meant to imitate. Whatever made the larger Vox units convincing got lost somewhere in shrinking that engine down to StompLab size. Number 3. The Digitech GNX3. This was Digitech's mid-2000s workstation, built around amp and cab modeling, plus a built-in recorder, drum machine, and whammy-style pitch shifting all in one box. The amp models ship with a speaker simulation switch left off by default, which means plenty of first-time owners plugged straight in and heard a shrill, unconvincing tone before ever discovering the setting that fixes it. A basic usability failure for a unit built to sell modeling to skeptics in the first place. That harshness is the same problem you get running any modeler without proper speaker compensation, which is exactly why FR/FR speakers, or full-range flat response monitors, matter so much for accurate tone reproduction with any modern processor. The pitch shift function generates an audible layer of noise the moment the expression pedal moves it, and the whammy-style emulation can't track full chords the way the standalone whammy pedal it's modeled after reliably can. Years of stage use also wear down the up and down foot switches faster than players expect, along with the data entry buttons, which get grimy and unreliable with regular gigging and repeated preset changes. None of that means the unit is worthless, and plenty of players who bothered to learn its quirks got real mileage out of it. The effects engine underneath all of that is genuinely clean and quiet, and it was a legitimate workstation for its era, popular enough that plenty of players still swear by well-maintained units today. But a modeler that hides its best-sounding setting behind an unlabeled switch and lets its signature pitch effect degrade with audible noise earns its spot here. Number 2. The Behringer V-Amp II. This one earns its spot on the list for a different reason than build quality. Behringer built its early reputation partly on cloning other manufacturers' hardware, and the pattern is well documented across the company's history. Roland took the company to court in 2005 over floor pedals that copied Boss's distinctive look and trade dress, following an earlier legal fight with Mackie in the late 1990s over cloned mixing consoles, a case that established the odd precedent that circuit board designs themselves aren't protected under copyright law in the United States. After the Roland dispute settled, Behringer's processor line shifted toward mimicking Line 6's pod instead of Boss's pedals. The V-Amp 2's silhouette, control layout, and general visual language are built to remind a shopper of the real thing without actually being the real thing. Every dollar spent on it is a dollar going toward a company's decision to imitate someone else's original engineering rather than fund its own, a pattern that repeated itself across mixers, pedals, and processors for years running. The company has since put out plenty of genuinely original, well-regarded gear, and its legal record is mixed rather than one-sided, including a PV dispute Behringer actually won. But the V-Amp 2 sits squarely in the era where imitation was the business strategy rather than the exception, which only makes it stranger that the product leaned so hard on someone else's design instead of competing on its own merits. Number 1. The Line 6 Pod 2.0. This pick is going to upset some people, because the original pod is a legitimately important piece of guitar history. When Line 6, founded in 1996, launched it in 1998, it was the first product that made real digital amp modeling something a bedroom player could actually afford, packaged into a kidney bean-shaped desktop unit that looked like nothing else on the market at the time. The Pod 2.0 expanded that formula in 2000, growing the lineup to 32 amp models and adding proper cabinet emulation on top of what the original offered. The problem shows up the moment a player pushes it into higher gain territory. Its distorted tones are notorious for a specific kind of digital harshness, an artificial fizz layered on top of the distortion, the same buzzy top-end audio engineers describe when a distorted signal gets sent direct without a real speaker cabinet, or an FR/FR speaker with proper impulse response loading, to naturally roll off those harsh upper frequencies. The pod became the textbook example of that exact problem, the reference point people still reach for when they want to describe what unconvincing digital gain sounds like. That fizz is the exact reason an entire generation of players decided digital modeling couldn't be trusted for serious use, and it took the industry the better part of a decade, through the Pod XT and Pod HD generations, to convince skeptical guitarists otherwise. Every unit on the best half of this list exists in a market that spent years actively engineering around this exact complaint. The unit that invented this whole category is also, somewhat ironically, the unit most responsible for giving it a bad name in the first place. That's the list to avoid. Here are the 5 units earning every dollar spent on them. Number 5. The Fractal Audio AM4. This is built for players who aren't ready to give up a physical pedalboard entirely, and it respects that instinct instead of fighting it. It's compact enough to sit alongside existing stomp boxes rather than replace them, and it integrates cleanly into a hybrid rig using the 4-cable method, where the modeler handles your dirt and effects while your real amp's preamp and power section stay in the signal chain. But underneath that small footprint, it runs the same Cygnus X3 amp modeling engine found in Fractal's flagship AXFX 3-rack processor, which means studio-grade amp tones packed into a unit that fits into a corner of an existing board. Fractal Audio built its reputation years before the current modeling boom, with its original AXFX processor released back in 2006, helping establish the entire category this list is built around. In direct side-by-side comparisons, its Tube Screamer emulation sits close enough to the real analog pedal that the differences are genuinely minute, and its fuzz face model captures a texture that trips up most other modelers on the market. The 6.3-inch screen doesn't support touch input, and navigating deeper edits leans heavily on a companion editing app rather than the hardware alone. With 240+ amp models and 325+ effects on board, there's very little tonal territory it can't cover, though newcomers should expect a real learning curve before all that depth becomes second nature. Number 4. The Boss GX1. Boss built this specifically as an entry point for newer players, and it shows in all the right ways. It comes in under $250, runs off USB-C power, a standard 9-volt supply, or 4 AA batteries, and the metal chassis carries Boss's well-earned reputation for surviving years of gig bags and van rides without complaint. A bright screen paired with light-up hexagonal buttons traces the active signal chain visually, making the unit genuinely easy to learn without cracking open a manual first. Holding the expression pedal in its heel-down position pulls up the built-in tuner without digging through any menus. Bluetooth connectivity lets a player stream backing tracks straight into the unit for practice, a small feature that ends up getting used constantly once discovered. No power supply ships in the box by default, a minor annoyance for a unit clearly aimed at first-time buyers. The amp models won't fully satisfy a player chasing ultra-accurate vintage tones, since Boss leans on its own house voicings across 23 amp models, rather than faithful recreations of specific classic amps. But the effects section draws from 38 of Boss's own compact stomp box designs, about as trustworthy a well as any beginner processor could pull from. It also supports MIDI integration for players who want to incorporate it into a larger rig down the road. Number 3. The NUX MG-300 II. Priced under $200 and frequently discounted closer to $150, this is the pedal that makes the strongest case for skipping individual stomp boxes entirely on a tight budget. The interface uses a color screen paired with dedicated knobs for tweaking parameters, so getting a usable tone doesn't require menu diving the way cheaper units often demand. 25 amp models and 50 effects cover a genuinely wide stylistic range for the price, and the clean and mid-gain tones punch above what the sticker suggests, holding their own against units costing 2 or 3 times as much. The high-gain voicings can turn a little harsh at the extreme end of the gain control, a common issue when running direct without FR/FR speakers or a proper IR loaded for speaker compensation, and the plastic construction leans more practical than rugged, so it's better suited to home practice and studio sessions than nightly touring abuse. The factory presets also benefit from some hands-on tweaking rather than being used exactly as loaded. Even so, it includes a built-in looper and a jam mode with backing drum patterns that most units in this price range skip entirely, making it an unusually complete package for a first serious multi-effects processor. Number 2. The Line 6 Helix Floor. Line 6's Helix launched back in 2015 and became a staple of professional touring rigs almost immediately, and it's stayed relevant through nearly a decade of firmware updates. The current generation modernizes it for right now, built around an amp modeling engine that delivers noticeably more responsive picking dynamics and clearer harmonic detail than earlier Helix hardware. It carries a large touchscreen along with 130+ amp models and 270+ effects spread across 12 foot switches. A built-in search function helps navigate that enormous library without getting lost in menus, and built-in Wi-Fi lets the whole unit update itself without ever needing a laptop connection. The 4-cable method integration is straightforward and well documented, making it one of the easiest flagship modelers to drop into an existing amp-based rig. The brushed aluminum chassis is genuinely built to survive a real touring schedule, and the scribble strip displays above each foot switch stay readable even under harsh stage lighting. Players who want a more compact option often step down to the HX Stomp, which runs the same core Helix engine in a 3-foot switch format that fits anywhere on a board. It's worth sitting with for a second that the same company responsible for the Pod 2.0 more than 2 decades ago is now building one of the most trusted rigs a working guitarist can own. Number 1. The Neural DSP Quad Cortex. This is the unit touring professionals keep reaching for, and spending real time with one makes it obvious why. The aluminum chassis is remarkably compact for how much processing power it packs inside, and despite that density, it's rugged enough that pro acts trust it as the centerpiece of a nightly live rig. The large touchscreen with drag-and-drop signal chain editing makes deep tweaking feel intuitive instead of intimidating, even for a player who's never touched a modeler before. The signature rotary foot switches double as knobs, letting a player make quick tonal adjustments mid-set without ever breaking stride. A small design touch that pro techs mention constantly. Neural DSP built its name on amp modeling software and plugins before it ever built hardware, and that software-first background is a big part of why the Quad Cortex's modeling holds up so well against companies that came from the amp building side instead. It carries over 50 amp models and more than 70 effects, all backed by built-in Wi-Fi, so the entire unit can update itself without ever connecting to a computer. Beyond the modeled amps, its neural capture feature lets a player snapshot the exact tone of their own real amp and cabinet, similar in concept to what the Kemper Profiler popularized, though Neural DSP's implementation runs on a different underlying architecture. Then carry that captured tone anywhere a gig takes them. Running it through FR/FR speakers or a flat response monitor on stage is the standard approach for players who want to hear exactly what they've dialed in, without a guitar cab coloring the output. The platform is scalable too, with a smaller Quad Cortex Mini running the same underlying engine in a footprint under half the size. The one real complaint worth mentioning is that some owners are still waiting on full third-party plugin compatibility. Priced around $1,800, it isn't cheap, but everything about it points toward a company that treated amp modeling like a problem worth solving properly, which is about as far from where this list started as it's possible to get. If you love content that separates the multi-FX units worth owning from the ones cluttering pedal store shelves, hit the subscribe button because it helps these videos reach players who are done wasting money on gear that doesn't deliver.